Thank you so much for staying with KTN News Center. Today is Monday, the 12th day of June 2023, and this day the world marks the day against child labor. That's the discussion we are having right here in studio. Next to me is Hussein Khalid, who is the Executive Director at Haki Africa. At the middle is Miriam Mbembe, who is the Operations Director, World Vision Kenya, and at the far end it's Ruto Kiprop Marimoi, the Advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And I begin with you, Kiprop. Let's talk about what the Constitution really says about child labor or abuse against children, and who is to take responsibility for that. And on top of that, these are two questions in one. Then why are we seeing so many cases of child labor and abuse against children? Why are the law enforcers of the government, I'm not sure who is responsible for this, ensuring that this article is not respected as it's supposed to be?
Thank you, Piriti. I think maybe just before we answer your question, I think it is important to understand the definition of child labor. And my colleague has tried to differentiate, because there's a thin line between what is child labor and what is positive child labor. There are those that are constructive, that are going to help the child in terms of being a prudent citizen in the near future. The Convention on Minimum Age, the ILO Convention 138, actually indicates that the minimum age for any child to enter into any form of employment is 18, which is the normal age of becoming an adult. But again, it has left it to member states, national legislation, to sort of define at what stage does a child engage in any other form of child labor which is not detrimental to the growth of the child. Okay, most of them actually I've seen from the ILO is 15 years is where you can negotiate 15 to 18. But anything that is below that, the convention actually prohibits. And if you look at the Convention on the Right of the Child, under Article 32, talks about the forms of child labor, and actually tells states to take measures, both legislative, educational, social, and economic also, to look at how they can prevent children from being engaged in this kind of labor. So there was forms of child labor, and this is, let me just have a list of them. Slavery or similar practices. We are talking about child trafficking. We are talking about forced recruitment into armed conflict, and this one is very prevalent actually in DRC, in Congo. And I actually have been seeing quite a number of child soldiers being used for the benefit, let's say, of mining purposes. These militia groups recruit children to protect their minefields so that they can get profit out of it. And again, this is other form of labor also. Drug trafficking, we have also issues of debt bondage, where you use a child to settle, use the kid to work for you so that he can settle some debts, okay? Then there's also the issue of hazardous working environment. So these are the kind of issues that we are talking about, that the convention is calling them the worst forms of labor, child labor. And the reason why most of these things happen, of course, and I've said, it is the issue of poverty. Most families actually, parents do push their children to work so that they can get something in the evening for them to eat. Okay, there's also the lack of quality education. I think this is the reason why one of my colleagues here was saying that in Kenya, the ASAL areas is where these prevalences of child labor. Reason being, maybe there are no schools around. Okay, and where I come from, in Elgeyo Marakwet and my neighboring county, Baringo and West Pokot, we've seen children being part of this militia called banditry that you normally see in the news. So part of the problem is lack of proper schooling areas. And this is something that is actually happening in Kenya. Then, of course, there is the poor access to decent work for the parents. There is the issue of poverty. At the same time, parents do not have a decent working places where they can earn a living that be able to sustain the children to go to pay school fees.
Yeah.
Okay. So and again, the issue of lack of understanding, of course, of child labor laws. Most of our government, and that's why we are saying we are regretting that there is no a celebration today marking this particular day. And that actually explains why we are saying partly is because we are not understanding the importance of this particular day and why we need to take care of the children. Because if you look at what the Bible says, actually, if you look at Romans 9:12, it tells you that the older generation or the older people, the older age, should actually serve the younger and not the vice versa.
Yeah.
And actually what we are trying to do is we are flipping it around. And you know, a nation prosperity depends on the children. If we are not taking care of the children, then we are going to have a state that will not be able to function well. Let me just go to what the law says, because Article 53 of the Constitution is very clear in terms of the rights of a child. And 53(1)(d) talks about not exploiting children. And it goes further under 53(2) that the best interest of the child is very important, and that has been captured very well under the Children's Act of 2022, which gives a raft of measures that the state must take to protect the interest of the child. It goes further actually under that particular act to create offices under the government now, which are targeting only the protection of the interests of the child. Okay. One of them is the Office of the Secretary of Children's Services. We have the National Council for Children's Services, and then the devolved unit of the County Children Advisory Committee. So these groups established by the law are actually to take interest of the child in terms of all the other aspects. Okay. We have talk about slavery. Okay. There's the exploitation. And of course, these are the laws, like the Sexual Offences Act will come in if issue of exploitation in terms of, the sexual aspect of it will come in to punish those who are going to offend the law and the child. Right. Look at the issue of defilement and the Sexual Offences Act, you look at that defilement. So there's enough laws actually to take care of the interest of the child.
And I'll get back to you. We'll talk about the enforcement of the law, because we have the Constitution, but when it comes to enforcement, that's where, quote unquote, we draw the line. So he's spoken about reasons for child labor, why they find themselves into doing some of these exploitative works. But let's talk about the consequences of this, allowing the entire generation miss school and indulge into child labor. What could possibly be a consequence, not just to the family, but also for a nation?
Thank you so much. I think as he was even mentioning about the forms of child labor, I remembered one of the forms now that Kenyans are actually watching. Some of us Kenyans actually have children in our houses as domestic workers. So, and that is also quite a big rampant case for Kenyans to know. When you're employing a house person, a house manager, a domestic worker, it's also important to ask, what is your age? And I think the Wakili here has tried to explain to us, so that we do not have that 15-year-old that has dropped out of school getting into your house to take care of your children. Some of your children are even 16, older than the child that you're employing. Now, getting to your question in terms of what is the impact of this. When you actually take away the child from being a child, there's a whole array of detrimental issues that are likely to happen. The physical part of it is very important. We find that we are overloading our children with a lot of baggage, carrying a lot of heavy weights, being out there for so long. The child that Hussein talked about, out there at 10 p.m. selling jugus, what time do they get to sleep? And tomorrow they have to go back to school. So the issue of physical health is very important. So when you look at the physical impact of child labor, it's quite enormous. looking at the emotional and the mental aspects of it. You can imagine you're a child, others are playing out their kati and everything, and you've been told you must do this. So what time do you get to engage with your fellow children? So the emotional things that we're actually seeing, some of them grow into adulthood. Some of us are who we are and behaving who we are, imagining that maybe we just learned the other day, but it's actually a culmination of how we were brought up when we were children. So the emotional traumas we underwent then, now as adults, we have the space to punch our own children, to punch our neighbors, to do everything that is really a vice into the society. So we actually end up having a cumulative of physical, mental, emotional impact onto our own children as they grow, and they grow with it even in the adulthood. And of course, looking at the whole cycle of poverty, because I would imagine that as a parent, the best thing that you can do is to take your child to school and then encourage them to be able to grow into academics so that they can get back and become members, productive members of the society.
Yeah.
But when you take them back to the labor industry, you're picking tea with them, they grow up to pick tea with their children, so the cycle of poverty continues. So if we actually to look at growing our economy, growing a society that is cohesive enough, and lucky that we're talking about social injustices, then you actually can say that the best thing we can do is to ensure that our children are protected from child labor, because then if we don't do that, we actually are going to perpetuate a lot of social and economic injustices into this country, in addition to the physical part that we're talking about. So the child you're seeing today walking on the streets, think about how they will be when they grow up as an adult. Yeah, because that is a good picture of that child that is really,
And Hussein, you are a human rights organization. Let's talk about, there was a report in 2021 that warned that the progress to ending child labor had stalled. And this was in the middle of a pandemic, COVID-19, when the cases were reportedly on the rise. But at the same time, a report is showing that, efforts to end child labor are not bearing any fruit. So what are some of the challenges that organizations like yours, or even that face efforts to ending child labor in Kenya and even in the region?
I think the challenges are many and varied in different ways. But just concurring with my colleagues here, one of the major challenges is public awareness about child labor. Public awareness, like Madam said here, we have these children in our homes working as domestic workers, and we don't even think that we are actually doing that. You actually say, it's my sister's daughter or my cousin, my third aunt from Nini, so this child is just sitting at home, so I've brought her here, then she can help me with domestic work. You don't, that's child labor. As long as that child is below 18, that's child labor. And especially where I come from at the coast, a good number of domestic workers are below 18 years. And when you question this, they say, no, the parents said it's okay. But it's not enough that the parents said it's okay. As an individual, you have to know that this is wrong. If you look at places like Mtwapa, sexual exploitation is very high, because you find a mother actually going to a school. When we received a phone call, the mother is going to school to demand that the child be released because, quote unquote, mzungu wake amekuja. So this mother is actually going to school to get the child from school, telling the headmaster, I need my daughter because she needs to go and serve some mzungu who has come from, he usually comes, I think, once a year. And so she wants the child away from school to go and serve the mzungu. And these are issues that are within our society, in those ASAL areas, in the rural areas. So public education becomes crucial, and one of the major challenges is to raise awareness about child sexual exploitation.
And time is not on our side, but I want to welcome Kiprop maybe in less than a minute to tell us what should be done so that Article 53 of the Constitution is fully respected.
Thank you, Purity. I think like what my colleague has said, lack of awareness. Lack of awareness is the most critical aspect, and most of our parents actually do not understand, and sometimes not all of them actually with their parents. There are those with our guardians, there are those who are in children's homes, And this is where really the problem actually, happens or begins.
Yeah.
But the long run is poverty is the push factor, is the force behind all this problem why children are being involved in child labor. So I think going forward, we need to improve our state of our economy in terms of our poverty levels. We need to increase our awareness in terms of engaging children into these acts of worst forms of labor. Yes.
In like 10 seconds, just a call to action in what you're doing.
Thank you. A call to action.
Yeah.
Just like World Vision, we do development work as an organization in 37 counties.
Yeah.
Our intention is to ensure that as we do development work, we are actually contributing to the social aspect, social protection aspect of the community, and as a result, we actually mitigate child labor.
Thank you so much. That was nice. Quick one. Thank you, Hussein. Yeah. Thank you, Miriam. And thank you so much, Kiprop, for making time for us as we join the world in making awareness against child labor. Thank you once again for being here. All right, and that's it for our show this morning. Thank you so much for watching KTN News Center. Let's continue making awareness, even as we commemorate the Day Against Child Labor, that children need to be protected from all forms of exploitation. My name is Purity Musenzuki. Keep watching KTN News and God bless.